Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Kevin Daniels, and welcome to the Worship Table. Today's episode is going to be about worship leaders' spouses. I'm here with three amazing men who are married to three amazing women who are worship leaders here in the local area. And so I'll have them introduce themselves, and we're going to jump right on in. Fellas.
All right. Well, let me start. My name is Jesus San Pedro. I am Gaby San Pedro's husband. Gaby is a worship leader and a performing artist. She currently was one of the worship leaders at Life Church here in Oklahoma City, and glad to be here, guys.
Yeah, awesome.
My name is Jared Frazier. My wife is Amy Frazier, and she's a worship leader, worship director at Crossroads Church here in Oklahoma City. She's also the founder of City Night of Worship.
My name is Nabari Monsi. My wife is Tiana Monsi. She's a worship leader at North Church here in Oklahoma City. And then she also has her own ministry that she does with her music, and she's also on a prayer team and a host of other different things. So it's kind of one of those things you can't stop her when she gets going.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you guys for being here today, man. I know it's a really amazing thing that you guys you do. My wife is my support system. I'm the worship leader, and so it's crazy when you have you've got somebody that is supporting you. It's the best thing in the world to have. So thank you guys so much for what you all do. Yeah. But I want to jump into some questions because I know it's an interesting dynamic that each of you have with your wives. Let's see. One, what role does your wife play in worship? I know you mentioned is an artist, but can we dive into more of that as a director of C Now, as a personal ministry artist, as a traveling artist? What role does your wife play, and how does that affect you in any way?
That's another question. Well, and in the case of Gaby, she's an artist in general. I can see her that way. She's a songwriter. She sings in Spanish, in English. She actually has been producing albums in Spanish previously and in Latin America before we came to the U.S. a couple years ago. And but she just also, at the same time, she's been leading worship since she was 11 years old. And so it's been a journey, and we've both been incorporated and being part of church work for a long time. So happy to share that journey with her.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, one, I'm gonna interrupt you here. So now that she's been doing this for such a long amount of time, how do you support her? And we'll kind of go around. How do you support your wife in what she does? Being that she sings in English and Spanish, she works, with a local ministry as well as her own recording and writing and all that. How are you supporting her as a spouse?
Yeah. Well, when we got married close to 15 years ago, I remember one day, we were recently married, not too probably into days or weeks. And I remember one day the Lord telling me, she has a talent, she has a calling, you better support her. And so it was not like, oh, you're doing your thing and she's going to support you. And so that day I realized that I was going to be accountable before the Lord if I would not do something to support her. And from that day on, in my heart, things changed. It's not that I was not willing to do so, but that day really everything changed. And I've been doing everything all the way from taking care of our two girls all the way through when she's singing, and you all know what I'm talking about, right? And then carrying the mic or talking to the sound guy, and and so it's a support that does not necessarily have boundaries. Sometimes we become, emotional supporters or coaches or I don't know, producers.
Yeah.
We're not. I'm not a musician. I'm more of a decomposer.
Right.
But then, so my support has been, as I would say, in different scopes, but committed to make sure that she uses her gift
good.
For what the Lord wants her to use it. So
That's so good. What about you, Jared?
So Amy, as I mentioned, is the worship director at Crossroads and has been a worship pastor, director, leader at multiple churches. And with C Now, it's just, there's always busy, and it's a calling upon her life. I've known that from when I very first met her.
Yeah.
And when we first met, and she said, "Oh, you play guitar and sing," and so I played and sang, and then she sang, and I put the guitar and quit singing. After I heard her, it was over immediately. But really, God told me early on that I was to be a rock for Amy.
Mhm.
And there's so much that goes on in church ministry, especially for a woman, and the things that they have to deal with, besides just the everyday, what songs to sing and how does this sound and or the is the congregation happy? And then you have the ministry side and growing that and bringing people. Sometimes it's just being a sounding board for her,
Yeah.
so she can just talk about what she's feeling and what she's going on. And we're both pioneer, and as guys, we're kind of, you always get that fixer mode.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard just to just sit and
there.
not want to offer
Yeah.
advice. But to all you young husbands, that's the best advice I can probably give you is you don't always have to have the answer. It's just listening. So being there for her and whatever she needs to do. If she needed back in when she was starting, if she needed a mediocre drummer, then she would call me. If she needs somebody to drive, she needs somebody, doing various errands, making sure stage tear down so we can actually
Right.
get to lunch on
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
from Sundays, because she usually has people pulling at her. And then just the ministry
Yeah.
aspect from City Night of Worship and being on that board and serving and just try to give counsel when needed.
That's good.
And big emphasis on, Ephesians chapter 4. It's typically a marriage type of counseling.
Yeah.
You see, man has his role, the wife has this role, but right before that, and it gets missed a lot, it says submit to one another.
Yeah.
And so you have to be okay in understanding that there's a time and a season for things, and she will support me in different
Yeah.
ways, but there's times that I need to be able to support and give of myself and surrender that and be completely okay with that.
Yeah.
And it's not emasculating or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
just, this is what God's called me to do,
Yeah.
as he's called her to do those same things.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love the approach that you guys kind of both mentioned. It is a calling.
Yeah.
It is a calling. I actually remember when I first got into ministry, one of my mentors met with my wife and I, and he looks at my wife, and he's not looking at me. He says, Kevin, you know the calling in your life. He says, he looks at my wife and he says, I need you to recognize that he is accepting the call that's on his life. He does not belong to himself.
Right. Right.
His time is not his.
Yeah.
Like, he has got to learn how to balance what he does for the church, what he does for other people,
Yeah.
and hold you here.
Right.
That's not your job. Your job is to let him fulfill his calling.
Yeah.
His job is to learn how to manage all of that. And so I love that you guys have recognized that, man, it was my calling to support my spouse,
Yeah.
to allow her to let God use her and let her use her gifts. For you, Nabari, your wife doing the same thing. How are you getting behind her and support? You guys have got some young kids.
Yeah.
How do you support your wife, man?
You're right. It's fun, definitely. I think for me with Tiana, man, kind of like we've all agreed, it's a calling. But one of the main things, as far as supporting her, is primarily just being a good support system for her in the midst of everything. So, outside of just church, and leading worship at, local church here, like I said, her ministry is music. She makes albums, songs, music. She goes out and she ministers to different people, different states across. And so I think just being able to kind of sit there and acknowledge what it is that she does, but also trying to push her out of her comfort zone and challenge her to grow, and do things from a different perspective outside of what she's used to. And so I think for me, outside of just challenging her to grow, I think another way I support her is being out there on the road with her.
Yeah.
So, for example, a lot of times when she would perform, she'd tell me stories. People trying to jive her out of her money, and so a lot of times I come into the picture and I'm like, hey, it's time to give my wife her money. So, you know, in the middle of it, sometimes people are like, you know, you play instruments, do you sing? And I'm like, no, it's not me. I'm just here for support, but I'm also her bodyguard. You know? And so, but just covering her in prayer, and just making sure that she's in the right mind frame to go out there and minister to God's people, you know, whatever's on her heart, and kind of do what she needs to do for God. I think that's really just one of the main things, and, you know, the many ways that I kind of support her.
That's so good. I've gotten to sing with all of your wives before, and do ministry with your wives. How does her role as a worship leader and you being a support? Tell me about your marriage and how that works. I know for my wife and I, we have to literally prioritize our marriage. Prioritize our marriage all the time, because I can always be in front of people, and I can literally wear this worship leader, pastor hat all the time, and singer hat all the time. And so our marriage can, sometimes it gets frustrating, because I'll come home and I'll still be in the mind of, hey, I'm leading people, I'm telling people, you know, where to go and what the Lord is speaking. And my wife would say, hey, I want you to be Kevin here. Can you be husband right now, and not be worship leader, not be worship pastor, just be Kevin, be husband. How do you guys keep your marriage a priority when, you know, your wife is being pulled here and pulled there, and there's demands on her to do this, and you know, there's even a creative pull that, you know, each of your wives have. How do you guys manage?
Well, we're thinking that both of us are, Gabby and I are pastors' kids, and so we grew up in that environment, and then we both became pastors, and so we were ministering together. And I've been busy on one side while she's also busy on her side, ministering and either conferences, preaching, and things, or work, and then she was doing her thing, and then sometimes we would even go together, because we have a ministry that is very unusual in the sense that we would be invited both. I do my thing, she does. So I was even more challenging, because who's going to take care of the girls, or who's going to, and kind of thing. So my view on this is that we've seen things from our parents. We have so many great examples from them in general that we've taken, and we've prioritized us in a sense that every time, let me give you an example. Every time we travel for something, she's invited, or I'm invited, and she comes, or we both are invited, we make sure that we open space for the family, and for the girls, and for us. And then if before the traveling or after the traveling, we know that we need to catch up between the two of us. I mean, it's either you spend some time out, like no work, no thing, and it could be a day of the week, or it could be another weekend, but we prioritize that, because we've seen so many ministers burned out because of the lack of that special connection. So we've been intentional in that way. We're not perfect though, but we've been very intentional in trying to make sure that we keep that connection moving. So.
That's good.
I feel for me, man, I relish in watching her minister. And so knowing what joy it gives her to go out there and minister, I relish in watching her do it. And so I think we'll have our time when she's done serving. And so we're real big in food, right? And so after she's done ministering, we're going to go get something to eat. And that's time for us. And so like we take advantage of the smallest amount of time that we can spend together, and we can be on the road, or we can go to an event for See Now or whatever it is, and after that we're gonna definitely go get something to eat, spend some time, laugh, joke, and I'll get the occasional question, did I sound all right? How did that, you know, like you were saying,
the occasional, every time, listen, every time,
that's a topic, dealing with excellence. Oh my,
you know, and so just giving her that reaffirmation, just like, yeah, you sounded good. Not just saying it because you said, like, I hear my wife every day. She's in the shower singing, creating, and everything else across the board. And it's gotten to the point to where my son Titan is 4 years old, and he's running around the house singing, you know. And so I think it's just a house full of joy and praise and worship most days, more than any.
That's awesome. I definitely, you said a word that I think is vital. It's intentionality. When Amy and I got married, it was a promise to the Lord that He's first. He's first. then each other, and ministry has to be then after. And a lot of times that's hard. That's a challenge. We're both. She's not only a worship director. We're both CEOs of nonprofits. We're both pioneer type, visionary, but then doers as well. So we have to. It's easy to get caught up where I'm thinking, I'm fundraising, I'm meeting, I'm having way too many lunches with people and running ministry. She's doing that as well. And then we're trying to support each other within our own ministries. But we have to set phones aside and say, you know, after these particular times of the evening, we're going to that's it.
Yeah.
And it could be something just a small. One thing that we love to do is just get in one of the vehicles and go for a drive.
Yeah.
Going nowhere.
Yeah.
Let's get something to drink and let's just talk.
Yeah.
Or we hang out on the back patio and this is wind down time.
That's good.
Because from the time you get up, when it's an event or it's worship service or anything else, it's going. And you just got to be able to know that, yes, this is the calling that God has on my life and I'm going to aim to please him. But the calling is not more important than God in my relationship there. And then he's placed us two together to be able to complement each other and be there for each other. And so we're gonna make time there.
Yeah.
And the ministry, let God work that out through us. He's using that. And it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But you have to be intentional with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How does each of you guys' role as supports to your wife and just obviously teammates? You guys are teammates.
Yeah.
How do you guys deal with that from a spiritual standpoint? How are you guys obviously staying connected spiritually together? You know, do you guys have a daily prayer time? Is it something that you do? Do you pray for your wife? My wife, she tells me every single Sunday morning, she'll send me, you know, the prayer hands and let me know, hey, I'm praying for you. And she'll put a small, you know, a nice word of encouragement in there. And sometimes it hits right in the moment, you know, where I know, man, the only reason my wife is saying this right now is because she's been praying and seeking the Lord on my behalf, knowing that I'm about to go, and we kind of say this, about to go do battle. You know, I'm about to go out and lead people in worship, which is a form of like battle. You know, how do you guys stay grounded and connected with your spouses from a spiritual perspective?
I mean, we have our own individual time because that's important.
Yeah.
And God speaks to Amy differently than he speaks to me.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of always a joke. Amy would say, the Lord said this. And when we were first married, I was like, yeah, sure. And then every single time those things would come to pass, come through it, I'm like, wow, maybe when I just need to listen to her. But she has her time, I have my time, but we come together as well. And I think praying in agreement is really important because in addition to, you know, praying for each other, but when you can come together and say, okay, this is what we want to pray about, and we're in agreement on that, and we're both praying, and it's not okay, here's your turn to pray, now here's my turn to pray, and then we just move up. But you find yourself not praying over each other, but it's just intertwined, and she's praying, and then I'm praying, and it's kind of a back and forth. But it's two hearts that and just a scripture type thing. So when we come to know Christ and we're married, it's the two become one flesh. You're not automatically one flesh. You're becoming one flesh, right? So your prayer life is becoming one. Your goals and how you seek the Lord and the intimacy with Him. You have the individual time, but it's overlapping as well. I think if you do that in agreement,
that's good.
Yeah, you said something that I think it's so important. That
make sure my wife heard that. I said something.
Yes, he says important things.
Right.
Kind of like when I was right that one time.
At least one time. So it's basically the fact that we are also in the ministry of worship. I mean, it's not our wives.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're one, so then I'm also a worship leader.
Yeah.
When she leads worship, I'm there.
Yeah.
That's one thing, and the other thing is that we've understood that everywhere the Lord opens up opportunities for her or for me, it's because we both have to come before the Lord and make sure that that's the right doors that we should go through. Sure. And I would say that in our case, it's not that we said too many times, we do pray together, but it's not, but I think it's more, we talk things through together before the Lord.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like not recently, we went through something that we weren't sure what to do and how to approach a situation.
Yeah.
And we said, how about you? And we talked all the details. What is the Lord put in your heart?
Yeah.
This is what the Lord's put in my heart. So what if we pray, as you said, like go and pray each one, and then maybe tomorrow in 2 days we'll get back together and see what the Lord is telling us, and then we find where's the common space that we understand the Lord is.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing, and then we just share every time. I think I've taken the role of being the chief encourager officer
Yeah.
for her, and so I have taken. So every time she goes out to minister, maybe she doesn't know, but my way of encouraging her is sending her like, may the Lord bless you and use you
Yeah.
powerfully.
Yeah.
And those are simple words.
Yeah.
But I always intentionally say it as a way for her to know that I know what you're doing.
Mhm.
I know you're going out there one more time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might end up in a routine, right? Like
Yeah.
they might think, well, I'm doing the same thing that I normally do every Sunday, or that I might normally do it.
Yeah.
No, but this is a new opportunity. And so
Yeah.
make sure the Lord uses you and get the lion out of your soul there, and
That's so
worship
good.
and
Yeah.
do all
Yeah.
what the Lord has gifted you for, called you to go for it. So I wish I could pray more
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the way that most people might do, like, oh, they sit for 2 hours and pray to it. We have a more
But you know, that's
ongoing base kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a point though. I think sometimes even I think any worship leader spouse kind of duo have to recognize that, man, it is powerful to pray
Yeah.
together.
Right.
But you said something that I love, the chief encouragement officer. Man, when I pray blessings over my spouse to go and do that, man, I'm not only acknowledging her gift, but I'm acknowledging that, man, the Lord has opened up an opportunity for you to go and spread his truth.
Right.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I think that's something that any spouse,
Mhm.
does not matter what role your spouse plays in,
Yeah.
but man, assume the role of the chief encouragement,
Yeah.
chief encouraging officer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What the scripture says, outdo one another in loving kindness. Like, make sure you're always cheering your partner on.
Mhm.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Got another question for you. What experiences have been difficult that you've gotten to watch your spouse overcome?
Honestly,
ministry.
I can't say I've watched her experience any difficult issues she had to overcome. But one of the things that we always talk about is less of me, more of you, right? And so it's an ad lib that she always used to sing, and so it became a thing that we wrote down, and we kind of prioritize that. So it's not about us; it's about what you're finna do through me for everybody else, Lord. And so I think as far as her experiencing anything difficult, we don't look at it as difficult. We look at it more as a challenge that we're getting ready to overcome.
That's good.
And so a mountain that God's allowing us to climb.
Yeah.
And, and so we take those challenges head on, and we bless him for it, and then we see him on the other side of
Yeah.
it. And so as far as challenges, it's hard for me to sit here and say that, hey, this is a hard thing. How do we get over it? Because, our faith is in the Lord. And so
That's
this
good.
is where we're finna go with it.
That's good.
So that's how we address it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Just seeing when you're in the pastoral ministry side of it, there's so much that goes on.
Yeah.
I always say that I think that the lead pastor and the worship leader probably catch the brunt of things more so than other areas of ministry.
Message.
And then you throw in kids ministry or children's ministry probably behind that. But really, the pastor's catching the brunt of, I didn't like this sermon, or it was too long, or you didn't do this, or you misquoted this, or so forth. The worship pastor is, you didn't play enough hymns. The song's too fast.
Right.
It's
Too
too
loud.
modern. It's too loud. The lights are this. It's so forth, on and on and on. But the aim is not to please
Yeah.
them. And so one of the best compliments I've ever heard about Amy, I've heard it many, many times, but early on, was that you're not just a worship leader, worship pastor, you're a lead worshiper. So her aim is always to worship the Lord,
Right.
regardless of whatever is going on.
Right.
So seeing her go through those type of things, and then we all have challenges in it just in leadership and in even our own businesses or so forth. And being brought in and you're the person that we want to hire to bring change and to set the tone or so forth like that. And I've experienced this in my own, is that when it's you got to be very careful with that, because when there's change and you're going to implement change, there's always going to be some backlash. There's always going to be somebody is upset, or there's going to be something. And are you prepared for that? And if you're not, the biggest disservice that you can do to the person is then you turn and run, or you bail on them. You've brought them in here for this, and you're supposed to be here. And then when this now is happening, I've experienced it myself in business, and she's as well. To see her grow through that, to handle it, and then learn from it, And there's times that I make mistakes or she's made mistakes, but we give it to the Lord, because we look at things as everything's an opportunity for improvement. It's not a mistake or a fail or anything like that. And then you grow that. God's refining us, right? Conforming us more to the image of Christ. And to see her come out the other side of that and more confident in the Lord, more victorious in the Lord, and more joy in the Lord. That's brings me joy and happiness.
Yeah, wonderful. So definitely with Gabby, we've gone through, as you said, like many challenges in life, pastoral, what you were saying, like there's so much we would stay here for the entire day going through them. But two things that are related to what she does as a worship leader and as a songwriter and singer. One of them is that I think it's a bottleneck thing that she has gone through, and sometimes she still goes through that. Is she's able to write in a very unique way. Pretty much say, hey, the Lord just gave me a song. And so, I don't know, she might have 50, 70 songs that she could record. And she's like, but I can't record all of these. What do I do? Lord, how do I prioritize? And so then sitting down, and it's been the same experience both times with her albums, that I've seen her like, which one are the ones that you want me to choose, Lord? And then she has more that she could record, but there's not there's not enough space for everything that she comes up with. That's one thing. And the other one was when she recorded her first album, the Lord just blessed that album and that initiative so much in Latin America. It's in Spanish, that album. And she won the most recognized award in Latin America as the best female album of the year. And so we got so excited that like 2 months later, we found out that she was pregnant. So she was like, oh, right in the moment where I could go out and get the word out, tour. Now and then the whole pregnancy was, she had to take really deep care because it was high. It had high danger of being miscarriage, so we had already gone through something like that before. So that was really, so it was a time for peace, for rest, for wait, instead of going out on the road. And so going through that, I remember that was a really important thing. And then the Lord gave her new songs that came out in the second album. During that time, to make the long story short, the passion and they it's a capacity thing that the Lord has just been
That's so good.
In the midst.
That's so good. When you talk about the creative space, as a worship leader myself, sometimes in the creative space it's very challenging because you have so many ideas, but how do you prioritize all of these great songs that are coming up, or even maybe not even songs that you've written, maybe songs that you've heard that you want to bring forth to your church, to your ministry. You're like, man, my wife told me one day, she said, Kevin, stop thinking about what you like. Stop thinking about the songs that you like, and that start thinking about what the Lord wants his people to hear. View the lens, get your lens out of it. And that's something I have to struggle with. And so to have someone who's like constantly letting me know, keeping me in line, keeping my feet grounded, and saying, hey, I get it. As a worship leader, it's I tell people all the time, now any position of spotlight is a dangerous place to be in, because we can get used to being the thing that shines.
Right.
Being the thing
Yeah.
that shines, and recognizing that, man, it's not our light that's supposed to shine.
Right.
Right. It's supposed to be Christ that shines through
Yeah.
us. And so it's a
Yeah.
dangerous place for many worship leaders, experienced worship leaders, new worship leaders. It is tough to be in this position, because all of the, oh my gosh, you sounded great, oh, worship
Yeah.
was so good,
Yeah.
you can sometimes think that
Yeah.
adoration and praise is yours.
Yeah.
My pastor preached a sermon on my first Sunday at my church. And a statement that rings in my head all the time is, never warm your hands on the praises of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, man, that hits so home,
Yeah.
because as a worship leader, that's what happens. Oh, you sounded great. You sounded
Right.
great.
Right.
And now you're thinking, okay, through this lens of, okay, now I've got to recreate this feeling that people think, oh, it sounded great, it felt great.
Yeah.
And that's not the goal. The goal is to edify and glorify the Father, to
Yeah.
take the
Yeah.
crown that you're given, whatever
Yeah.
it may be, and give it right back to him. You know, God, thank you that they enjoyed this worship gathering, this
Yeah.
experience. Like, it was about you, not about me.
Yeah.
It's so good to have some, just that kind of support.
Yeah.
That kind of support for you.
Yeah. Definitely.
What would you give to a husband who is or a spouse in general, whose spouse is leading worship and traveling and is an artist, is as a worship, City Night of Worship, founder? What kind of advice would you share to someone, and what can they do to get behind their spouse and support them? What can they do to help keep their spouse grounded, one, connected as a married couple, but even grounded in the Word of God? What are some things and advice you can give?
Thinking. That's a tough one there, man.
I think it's your
Make sure,
side.
make sure you can carry. Listen, make sure you can carry the microphones, the
Yeah.
cable.
Well, I can say something. So one time I heard someone say
Yeah.
something so powerful that impacted me. He said, whatever, or at any point in time of the life of a minister or someone that is serving the Lord, when he opens up an opportunity or a door, he doesn't only open it for one of the two. He opens that up for both.
Yeah.
So whatever the Lord has, let me give you an example. We moved 4.5 years ago from Venezuela to Oklahoma City. The Lord had opened up an opportunity for what I do. But guess what? He wasn't only thinking about me. He was also thinking about her. She's opened up. I mean, the fact that we're here
Yeah.
is because there was a welcoming reality, a window of opportunity to minister for her too. So that changes the mind of whoever is there, thinking that maybe the Lord is opening up an opportunity for my wife or for my husband as a worship leader, but not so much for me. No, that's not the case. You both are in it, and I don't know how many people think that both are in it, and how fully you actually live that out.
That's good.
Because I mean, until we understand that it's not either or her calling, my calling. No, it's our calling as a family. And so God is he's a coherent God. And he makes our families a cohesive unity.
Yeah.
And he's not going to be doing random things for one and then the other one is left aside. So he has great plans for us as a family.
That's amazing.
I think for someone, if they're getting into this as the first time, or their spouse is in it, or really for anybody, ground yourself in the Lord first and foremost. Know that our call as husbands is to be there and support our spouses, to protect them, to help provide and all that. But you have to be flexible. You have to be selfless. You have to love her more than yourself. Right? I mean, and so I know that when I was in the military and moving Amy all around the country all the time, that was a season that God had us in, and she was really there to support me during that time. And moving 4 times in 6 years and changing career, I mean, all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and this is a time that I'm there, for her. But for the husbands, know that there's going to be challenges that your spouse is going to have to face. There's going to be time demands and people demands and all kind of things like that. Be available, be in the Word, and try to think about the things that she needs more than just what I think that she needs. God, what does she make me to be the husband that she needs, that you designed me to be, that you want me to be for her? Because if I'm just trying to be the husband that I think that she needs, man, I'm gonna mess that up 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
But if my goal is to be the husband that God wants me to be for her, then seeing where she's hurting, seeing where she has challenges, seeing needs that are there, seeing support, seeing encouragement, all those things will they won't be rarities. They'll come more quickly. But you're just open to that. If like you said, if you're close minded to it, and this is my career and this is what I do, and this is your career, and I go to your things and you come to my things, and that's all it is. I mean, you're missing out on so much of how God's using you really together.
It's echoing what you said, man. Like, definitely being grounded in the Lord, as a husband. A lot of times I've seen where husbands get agitated, having to move around a lot with their wives, or just having to go to almost all their events and different things like that. And you can almost tear your spouse down. You can shift their focus on what it is that they're supposed to be out there doing, just by what it is that you say, your demeanor, your attitude. So just being grounded in the Lord and making sure that you can keep them uplifted in a positive manner, keeping them in the right headspace, and again, covering them in prayer, making sure that it's like you said, it's not about me or you, it's about us and what God has called us for to do. So I think just definitely, like you say, being grounded and just making sure you're able to love her the way that God intended for you to love her, and encourage her, uplift her, inspire her, nurture her, take care of her. Just, the small little things, those little small details matter.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I covering your wife in prayer, that covering your spouse in prayer is pivotal. Being intentional about that goes a long way, because you can see those small seeds being planted, recognizing that, like you said, man, this is our calling together, as a family, we get to advance the kingdom and the gospel as a family together by supporting one another. And the same thing, you mentioned just being present, and knowing that, hey, because we do this together, there are going to be seasons when I'm following her around, being her cheerleader and her support. And then there are seasons, kind of you said, your wife has been for you, knowing that is amazing. So I appreciate you, gentlemen. One, not only for what you guys contributed here tonight, but just what you do on a day-to-day basis, being a backbone and support for some worship leaders. That's coming from a worship leader. I thank you for that. Also, man, I thank you for just supporting your wives, man. Not only you guys amazing worship leaders, but amazing husbands, and that's just evidence of that in that conversation tonight. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you for
For those of you who watched, I hope that you guys learned a lot. Thank you so much to any worship leader out there, to any spouse out there who watches this. We pray that you're encouraged. Have a great night.